Hello, my name is Sara Paz Vasquez Vasquez, and this is my presentation, The Bridges of Understanding and Community. And for this project, I have chosen to create my own Chicano text, a poem that is accompanied by an acrylic painting inspired by it. And this poem and the painting, they function as Chicano text because I have taken inspiration from the works of Rodolfo Gonzalez and Gloria Anzaldúa and used them to create possible guidelines for how liberation can be achieved, as I will explain in further detail throughout my presentation. My text is based on the works of Rodolfo Corqui Gonzalez and Gloria Anzaldúa, both of which were influential Chicanx writers, among many other things. Rodolfo Gonzalez was a Chicano activist, organizer, poet, and leader, and Gloria Anzaldúa was an impactful cultural theorist and radical feminist who created accessible and unique works of literature that had their focus on Chicanx struggles and liberation. As well, she was also an activist for farm workers' rights. And the poem I Am Joaquin is one of the most well-known Chicano works to date and speaks to the struggles that Chicanos have endured while fighting for acceptance, equal rights, and economic justice in the United States, as well as the history that Mexicans share tracing back to before the Spanish conquest. And in the poem, the reader follows Joaquin as he goes through the contradictions that make up his identity and the perseverance that Chicanos have shown in history. And Light in the Dark, Luz en lo Oscuro, Rewriting Identity, Spirituality, and Reality is comprised of Anzaldúa's most mature philosophies and theories on Chicanx feminist studies and cultural and queer theory. And because so many topics and theories are explored in the book, I have focused on parts of chapter 4, which is titled Geographies of Selves, Reimagining Identity, Nosotros, Us, Other, Las Neplanteras, and New Tribalism. And the chapter sets up guidelines for removing the boundaries that set people in the struggle for liberation apart, particularly Chicanas and other women of color. And I chose to depict people of all different ages, walks of life, goals, and backgrounds in my painting. And I based them on people that I know personally, as it was easier for me to imagine them in the painting, interacting with each other, supporting one another, and helping each other cross the bridge of healing and liberation. And when I painted the people that you now see here on screen, I wanted it to seem like they were all speaking to one another and connecting in some sort of way. They're all facing forward, walking some hand in hand in unison. And I chose not to focus on where exactly they're going, but rather on the sense of unity and connection that they're displaying. And going on to the first image here is in the path to community and building the bridge that will take us to it. Unhealed wounds are brought along by most, and it is those experiences and the journey of healing through them that create knowledge and understanding. And the first individual crossing the bridge that I wanted to dive into and analyze is the third woman walking across the bridge. And she's wearing a black shawl, which is a nod to a line in Gonzalez's poem describing women mourning the loss of their children from either war or social strife. And I took inspiration from his poems as I was writing my lines in my poem, and I wrote, "We feel the same, we mourn the same, and we sing and rise above the same." And this is meant to represent the impact that having a community can have on someone in mourning, and how sharing the grief that is felt when faced with traumatic experiences or memories with others is what helps pull someone out into the light of healing and redirection. And a crucial step in growth and liberation is ensuring that no one is expected to maintain the task of raising and supporting the future generations on their own, while also in the process of healing. And in Gonzalez's poem, he writes, "Her rosary, she prays and fingers endlessly, like the family working down a row of beats, to turn around and work, there is no end. And these are lines 122 through lines 125 of his poem. And I think that I think it's necessary for there to be an end to this work that he describes in his poem, because women in society should not have to bear the burden of the household constantly to the point where it seems like there is no end. And they should be encouraged to delegate so that they can spend time not only healing themselves with others, but also through their activism. And this is where community comes into play, because there are so many ways that a community can work together to make sure that someone has had the time or has the time to engage in their own healing and to engage in activism. And just to give a few examples, sharing the act of childcare with trusted adults in the community, or a rotation of different people preparing large meals so that the act of feeding future generations can be shared. Carpooling to save on time and gas is another one. And fighting inequality starts at the familiar level, within homes and other shared spaces. And once we do that, we can effectively build up and liberate each other and others at a much larger scale. And now, moving on to the second image. This image is a close-up of roots coming from the biggest tree in the painting, and I wanted it to reflect the line that I wrote, that is, when we spread our roots into spaces not made to hold us, we crack the clay that was once molded to keep us out. And I wrote this line with solidarity in places of academia and employment in mind. Unity in places where one is expected to uphold a position of professionalism is necessary, and it's counter-effective to be threatened by someone who looks like you or shares your traits. And Gloria Anzaldúa touches on this in chapter 4, page 115 of Light in the Dark. She noted that in academic spaces, she had witnessed other Chicanx and Latinx people exhibit hostility towards one another and show, as she puts it, emotional scars that riddled their body. And I think it's crucial to remember that as long as there is fear that you don't belong somewhere because of something that you cannot control, such as your race, your ethnicity, class, or physical traits and abilities, you are not secure or liberated. And that's why it's so important to crack open those molds that were set in place to keep people divided and in the mindset that others who are like us are threats or competition. And the changes that we initiate within our university, schools, places of work, communities, and our homes should be reflective of what kind of example we want to set for the younger people living and learning in them. And now, moving on to the third image, here is a close-up of a young girl that leads the group to the other side of the bridge, and it's located in the lower left area of the painting. And this girl is meant to represent the last lines of the poem, which are, "We are connected in every way, in every child and their curiosity, compassion, and empathy. Let them lead, for it is their future we're fighting for." And when I wrote this line, I was mostly trying to convey that the young people of today are the ones who will inherit the society and communities that are built by the people who have raised them. And the communities that they grow up in are what can help them form meaningful relationships with people that can build their understanding of others and reduce feelings of loneliness or otherness. However, as I was painting her, I realized that she should also represent the work of student organizations and movements of today and in history. These organizations that take the knowledge that they learn in class and organize when they see violent injustice and oppression occurring. And it's important to have knowledge of the means of resistance and oppressive powers, but what good is it unless it's utilized when we see history repeating itself? Student-led protests have been catalysts for change, as seen throughout history with the protests that played an important part in bringing awareness to the horrific apartheid in South Africa in the late 1970s to the 1990s, which eventually led to the U.S. Congress's Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act being passed in 1986, or the East Los Angeles Chicano student walkouts that protested the discrepancies between the treatment of Mexican American and white students in 1968. And when we look back on what side students have been on in times of conflict, they have usually based their position on facts, equality, empathy, knowledge, and humanity. And I think that that's the side that we need to be on when fighting for liberation. And healing, to close things off, healing generational wounds and traumas are journeys that take support, patience, and understanding. And I'd like to close my presentation with an example of solidarity and support that can be found in nature. The Three Sisters crop planting method has been used by indigenous people in the Americas for over 5,000 years. The stalk of the maize or the corn acts as trellis for the bean plants climbing vines. The bean roots release nitrogen, which acts as fertilizer, into the soil and acts as stability for the stalk. And the squash leaves shade the soil beneath them, allowing for moisture to remain in the soil that the beans and corns are planted in. And these crops, when planted and rooted together, strengthen one another in their own unique ways. Liberation, equality, and acceptance for all of us is a goal that needs to be reached together. And it is not a linear one, but rather one that is blessed with the experiences and possibilities of those on the path, on the journey. And in the journey of healing and knowledge, the action of unity and supporting one another in all aspects of life, personal, academic, and professional, is what is going to propel us forward. Thank you.